that I think you have to add sprint modalities into. You have to rotate sprint modalities. I use uphill sprinting on grass. I use downhill sprinting. I use sleds. I use ankle weights. There's a company called Lila Movement Technology. They have weighted sleeves and stuff like that. That stuff is phenomenal. And I use combinations. I use ankle weights, weight vests, uphill, downhill. But the actual regular sprint, probably 15-20% of the time, because we use a lot of contrasting. But that's how you hack the code of the body. I think the body the body's scared to go faster. It's homeostasis. It's trying to stay normal. It hates change.
That was Brandon Byrd, and you're listening to the Just Fly Performance Podcast. Before we get to the show today, I wanted to mention a really cool item that is available now from our sponsor, simplyfaster.com, in their store. That item is Exogen Premium Wearable Resistance. Exogen is a series of tight-fitting sleeves along with uniquely shaped fusiform weights that strap directly onto those sleeves. So what I mean is you can have shin sleeves, arm sleeves, shorts, and a vest, and you can strap these uniquely fusiform shaped weights. They're light in nature, 100, 200 grams, that strap on in a way that allows you not only to resist movement very specifically, but also add fine-tuned elements of rotation to that resistance. So this is the next level of wearable resistance. You may have heard this from back long ago on the show, Hank Kreinhoff talking about it, to recently Chris Korfist, sprint coach, talking about it. This is the next level in premium wearable resistance. I've used it myself. I love it. I love not only the way it feels and the way you feel form and technique change. It's like combining technique with power. And so often we just think about weighted vests as just pure force, pure downward gravity loaded resistance. This is the ultimate combination of technique with power, and it shows up in things like Chris Korfist being able to take time off an athlete's 10-meter fly by putting the sleeves just on one side of the body, an ipsilateral resistance. We're using the body's own systems, fine-tuning it, and that's what this does. It allows you as the coach or an athlete to create, explore, and fine-tune the way that the resistance is rotationally impacting the body. This is next level stuff, and I know you'll love it. So you can check that out in the Simply Faster store. Head on over to simplyfaster.com. That's simply with an I, faster.com, and get your Exogen gear today. Hi, everybody. Welcome to another show. So it's always good to sit down and just do nuts and bolts talks on getting athletes faster, stronger, more powerful, and more prepared for their sport. Today's show is really the epitome in so many ways of just that. Our guest is Brandon Byrd. He is the owner of Byrd Sports Performance in Orefield, Pennsylvania. He's an alumni of the University of Pittsburgh and has learned from elite coaches such as Louie Simmons, Charlie Francis, Buddy Morris, and many others. Brandon has a unique blend of rotating training stimulus that gets serious results. As you just heard on the teaser, he has a rotating system of sprints, lifts, jumps, a continual PR system that gets serious results for his athletes. The guy's just a monster in getting outputs. Works with a lot of athletes of all sports, as well as a lot of track athletes. You may have watched his social media videos of his athletes just crushing it with sprints and jumps and continually improving. So, of course, we got to chat. We got to get this talk in, Brandon and I. I always love putting out there what great coaches are doing. This is an awesome nuts and bolts show. Lots of great things that you'll be able to right away take from the show. And if you listen to the end, you will hear what I personally am doing as an athlete still at the age of 37 as a result of talking to Brandon. So excited to get you guys this show. Let's get on to it. Oh, one more thing. Almost forgot. So Brandon's going to talk about fly 10s in the course of this show. And he's talking about yards, not meters. So when you hear these crazy fast fly 10 times, they are still crazy fast, but they're not like world class going to the Olympics fast, not yet at least. So just to distinguish that when you hear these times and if you're familiar to meters, fly 10s and all that business. So anyways, excited to get you guys this show with a great coach. Let's get on to it, episode 226 with Brandon Byrd. Hey Brandon, welcome to the show. I'm glad I can have you on today.
Oh, thanks a lot, man. I love this show, and I listen to it all the time. I've been saying, man, I'd love to be on there one day.
Yeah, yeah. And no, I know you're always posting videos of people who are just setting speed PRs left and right. And you've been in this game for a little while. And let's start by tell me a little bit about your coaching journey, specifically in regards to who have been like the big rocks and mentors you've had over the years in developing your system in speed and athletic power and explosiveness.
Yep. So I went to the University of Pittsburgh and I played football there and ran track one year. And the first guy I met Coach Harris for the first guy I met. And the second guy I met was Buddy Morris. And Coach Harris goes, "You're going to be Buddy Morris a lot more than me." And he's great. And I said, "Wow." And little I didn't know, he's this amazing, power speed guy. He's met all the top coaches in the world. And after I get done, I kind of like dissected his program. I talked with him, and he introduced me to Louie Simmons at West-side Barbell. And Buddy Morris, during the summers or the springs, he'd bring Charlie Francis down from Canada to train us. So like I actually got to work with Buddy Morris, Louie Simmons, and Charlie Francis at the same time. I said, after college, I met all these great guys. I think I could apply this and help some kids. I actually walked on. I think if I knew what I knew now in high school, I could get scholarship and get kid scholarships. So I said, let me apply this to the high school level in the private sector. And that's what I've started doing. And along the way, I met a guy like Dick Hartzell, who's a mobility genius and a rehab genius. And I met Bonnie Thompson. And like those are my rocks right there, So I kind of just branched off from that's where I first started. And just recently, there's a great guy you're gonna have on the show, Jared Bidney. He's an amazing trainer out of Peachtree, Georgia. He's kind of added some wrinkles in there for me, but those are my rocks right there. I've kind of just branched off from those and reverse engineered and kind of applied their systems and integrated into my system, and it's helped me create some great power speed athletes.
I felt, did Louie Simmons have a role in the system you've created at all?
Oh, huge, huge, huge. When I met him, it was like the Matrix, it was kind of like I plugged in, I got just a burst of knowledge. And I said, basically, he's met all the Russians. Everything is old. It's just people forgot how to use it.
Yep.
The Russians had scientists. They used it for track and field. And I talked to Dr. Yessis. I met him too. But Louie Simmons he took some of the great track and field guys, Yuri Verkhoshansky, their special strengths. Well, Louie basically controls, and he doesn't run his guys, but he controls most of the force velocity curve, because there's lifting and there's speed strength, spring speed, as your book is called, and there's explosive power. So he knows how to develop that better than anybody ever seen. So once you can control that part of the whole, maybe 90% of the force velocity curve, you can make great athletes. So he taught me that there's different strengths, and you got to train all these strengths. And once you train all these strengths, you have a superior athlete.
So as per our previous conversations about your system, I think about Louie's ideals a lot. So could you explain, at least with like setting PRs regularly and that type of idea?
Well,
does that fit?
When I first met Louie, I went there a couple of times, and I called him like once a week. And I think he's probably annoyed, but it's simple, but it's very complicated. But I think I take from it is every week in my system, in his system, I got to know how strong you are, and I didn't know how fast you are, and I didn't know your weaknesses, because creating the best power speed athlete, it's all about. And Buddy Morris says this, and every top staff coach says this. It's about the best athletes create the most force in the shortest amount of time in the right biomechanical positions. So how do you increase force production? You get stronger. How do you shorten the time that you use that force? That's rate of force production. That's dynamic effort, which is West-side. Also that comes from science practice strength training as well. Vladimir Lazorsky. And then fixing your weaknesses is a repetition method. So max effort is increasing your force, and then the ability to shorten that rate of time, use that force is dynamic effort. So that's why I think that all those three methods must be used in your training. You got to fix those weaknesses every week, and that's why I do it. If I see a kid sprinting, and I can just see their limbs aren't moving fast enough, there's no elasticity. They have some weaknesses in their muscles. The repetition method will fix that. And then also they're not moving that fastly. That's the rate of force isn't good. The dynamic will fix that. And then they're not putting a lot of power in the ground for jumping or sprinting or swinging a baseball bat, throwing. They need to get stronger. Those three things, there's no way around about it. It's just the right exercise you need to choose to fix those three things, and you'll have a great athlete. And then those sticking points, those biomechanical weaknesses, you fix those, you'll have fixes the speed all the time, the jumping ability all the time. The things you see in sports.
Yeah. So with that might be before I get into how you rotate your exercises and are seeking PRs a lot, which is kind of like a huge crux of what I wanted to chat with you about in terms of results you get. That is interesting with where I think about the West Side. You have the max effort, dynamic effort, but then the repetition days, which are, I guess you could call it like a little bit of a work capacity and antivirus, but also with the purpose of bringing up weak muscle groups to improve technique. So I think many people might be familiar with the powerlifting version of that, where I don't know if your hamstrings are weak, you do a bunch of reverse, glute ham raises or something like that. Tons of volume in the weak muscle group. How does this work with an athlete who is not sprinting well? I'm sure there's lots of ways, right? But what are some of your key ideas? An athlete has XYZ wrong with them. What are some key things? Because I'll say this too, I don't want to get carried away with my rambling, but I think a lot of schools of thought would say, well, just fix it technically in the sprint versus, well, let's bring up some underlying strength qualities and then just go sprint and compete. Those schools of thought. Right. Hope I'm not overcomplicating this. Anyways, could you clarify? I always overcomplicate stuff. Could you just clarify that a little bit with how that shows up in a sprint system?
And my idea of doing athletes, I tested them both. I think there's like the functional movement screen. I don't think that's a great thing, but because when you're sitting there statically and you're not under a high forces or high loads, everybody's gonna look great. But once you put them at high speeds and high forces and sprinting, and you put them and under heavy loads of lifting, you're going to see some weaknesses. And I believe your technique in sprinting and lifting it's determined by your weaknesses, by the elasticity of your tendons, the fast twitch fibers you have, the nervous system you have. Once you fix their weaknesses, it's easier to me to fix technique. And it's if you have bad mobility, that's going to limit your sprinting. You don't have, your nervous system is dull. It's not working quick enough. That's going to affect your technique. You've got poor ranges of motions. You're just not strong. Like a weaker sprinter, they're going to need to have a longer ground contact time because their limbs can't move fast enough. They have to strike the ground and more in front of their center of mass to push more and have more backside mechanics because they're not as powerful. And that goes to me, once you get stronger, then you can create more force. Then you'll need to step out in front and use more backside mechanics. You can have less ground contact time and less braking forces, and you'll have more foot contact, more beneath the center of mass. But that's all fixable by the strength, stronger hamstrings, hips, all that type of stuff. So that's how I look at it. Again, everybody in a sprint, the posterior chain must be developed. When that leg is in that your hip flexion, your knee, you have good knee drive, your thighs parallel to the ground. What pulls you first is that glute. That hamstring pulls the leg down to the earth, your foot down to the earth, and your opposite QL. So all those three things must be strong. If you have a weakness in those three things, I've tested it for 15 years. Those athletes do not create a lot of force. They have longer ground contact times. They're slow. Their amortization phase is slow. And their jumping is just the strength is usually the key in these athletes. Now, at the same time, sprinting makes build strength. So you got to work it at both ends. You got to build all these strengths, and that comes from chasing and surfing the force velocity curve.
Yeah. So you said the three areas. It was hamstring, QL. What was the other one that you were?
Glute, hamstring, and opposite QL. Those must fire explosively and fast, and they all must be strong. If those aren't strong, when I start an athlete, the first thing I do test is at QL. Doing 45-degree hyperextensions. I think in your book it says that those 40-degree, the more loads they can handle in that 45-degree hyperextension, they'll become great sprinters and jumpers. And I've tested it all the time. And my athletes come in there. My weaker athletes use 30 pounds on that on the foot over hyperextension. My great athletes, they all use about 100 in the hundreds. And right there, that exercise right there is fixing the glute, opposite QL, and the upper hamstring. And that's key. There's direct correlation right there for sprinting and speed.
Yeah, that was actually an interesting discovery I made when I was writing Speed Strength, is going through some of the research and noting that it was something where I think it was younger athletes, maybe like, I don't know, maybe a group that was like teenage athletes level. And they found that the better accelerators had stronger spinal erectors. And I think psoas actually didn't matter for acceleration in that particular study. But at the time, I mean, I was so jaded and I think I was so jaded in the sense that too much lifting, especially with poor form and extension patterning, will overdevelop the spinal erectors and anterior tilt and de-train the glutes and even hamstrings a little bit, which that was my issue. So I was just jaded. But I guess, if you're just fast, like someone who's just fast and never even lifted, and they just have it, those muscles are going to be strong because it has to stabilize the pelvis to do the job. If those muscles, the spinal erector and QL, for those of you listening, QL, quadratus lumborum, basically just think low back stabilizing muscle for simplicity's sake. If those aren't strong enough, then you lose the stabilization. So after that, I was like, okay, like I get it. I think for me, it was just a journey and making sure I didn't try to get that through like a low bar back squat in my own mind. Try to use, like you said, like hyperextensions and stuff that really links and stuff that has cross body potential and stuff like that to link that. And that makes sense to me with those three and looking at that and making sure has a good integrity.
In my gym, if you can't do so much on 40-degree hyperextension, I can't put a bar on your back because you don't have and your abs aren't strong. You don't have the core stability to handle, heavy barbell lifting. Now, that being said, the people that can squat good, they are your best accelerators. And I clocked this. I got 2 football players. I had one guy, they're pretty much the same. They weigh about 210 and they are about 5'9". The one is a better squatter. And his first 10, he's always quicker. And then when he fades in the last 10 was 40. And I got a NFL player, about the same size, but he's not a good squatter. He's a better deadlifter. His, the better squatter ran about a 1.447 in the first 10, and the better deadlifter ran a 1.56. Now, conversely, the better deadlifter in the final 10, he ran a 0.83, and the other guy was the better squatter and the poor deadlifter, he ran a 0.91, and he's usually in the upper nines. But that's what you got to fix. You need a 1-to-1 ratio, so both those you can feather out and even out that whole sprint dynamic. That's supposed to be sprint profiling, which I want to get at 1080s pretty soon, so I can kind of do that. But that's what I kind of look at these. I study these athletes. I'm always in my system. I test them the first time, but I'm testing you every time. I always must know how strong you are. We test how strong every time with tendos. We test your vertical leap, raw jump, ground contact time every time we jump, and we test your sprinting splits every time we run. So our athletes, they know, and sometimes they're demoralized because if they had a practice, which I can't take account of sometimes, they're usually plateau, but my athletes usually increase a little bit each time. And that's the thing. My goal is if I can increase you maybe a 0.0 in a sprint each time, or I increase your vertical jump 0.1 each time, or you gain 2.5 pounds of strength each time, it adds up over time. And that's my philosophy. I think that's why I get frustrated if I pass these kids along and they plateau or they go backwards, because if I can get them to just a little bit better each time, gosh, eventually you're gonna have a good athlete. I had a poor athlete. This cat was 100. He's a freshman, young guy, but he jumped 15 inches, and he only could squat 110 pounds. And he ran in a fly time. He ran a 1.39, and he improved slow. He improved maybe 0.01 every time, but now he jumps. It's been about a year. He jumps 30 inches. He went from 15 to 30 inches, and then he went from a 139 to a 102 fly time. And his squat went from 100 to 240. And that's all about fixing his weaknesses. What was his weakness? He had poor quads and a weak glute. So I just attacked those weak glutes every week and then kept jumping him and sprinting him, watching his technique, make sure his ground contact was high and his posture was correct. All of a sudden it just clicked. Even last week he dropped about from 110 to 102.
Wow.
Just doing that.
Wow.
You know.
I really like the emphasis on, especially like just going back to what you said about the 45 glute ham and stuff like that. I think so often, and I've had a few conversations, a lot of this show is kind of heading into the exercise categorization realm right now. And it's like the first thing all these coaches just want to do is just start squatting, just get in and squat. But that's not, it's the
squat is my tester. It tells me what's wrong. It creates force, but it tells me where I need to direct. Like Dr. Josse I had on my podcast, he said the Russians use special exercises that were similar to the regular exercises, but a little different. And that's Louie Simmons too.
Yeah.
To fix the main exercise, and that's how I cure the ails of the sprinting and the jumping.
Yeah.
I use those special exercises, not a regular squat, but something that helps it, or 45-degree back raise that will help their sprinting and jumping.
Yeah.
Everything is GPP for sprinting and jumping. These S&C coaches get caught up in, they get crazy in their lifts, their squat. They're chasing these squat numbers, which is good. They chase these deadlift, but those are accessories to a softball or a sprinter or a high jumper. You have to remember that.
Yeah.
They do this just because this is a side gig for them. This is a side hustle. But they do it just to get better at their sport.
Yeah.
That's the key.
Yeah, it's always got to come back to sprinting for sure. So going into a little bit of your system. So one of the things that really intrigues me about what you do, and I'll see the videos you post, and it's not just fly 10s, meters or yards. It's uphill fly 10, downhill fly 10. Like you've taken something that I really love about what you do is you've taken that like West-side, like slightly alter the motor program, or even Bondarchuk, throw us 18-pound hammer, just slightly different instead of the 16, right? Just these little tweaks that are allowing your athletes to PR all the time. Could you explain like how that system kind of formed up, and then what that looks like in the course of 2, 3, 4 weeks of training?
Okay. That's a great question. Now, everybody knows I do conjugate system. And people think the conjugate system is basically rotating intensities, exercises, and that's a constant rotation. And people do it just lifting. One thing that stuck with Louie Simmons, he always says this, the law of accommodation. Do the same thing for too long, you no longer can get better at it. And that applies to not only lifting, it applies to jumping too, and sprinting. So that's where I come up with that idea. I think and I was, years and years ago, I would just sprint straight, flat land, on a track. And it would give good results, but I found that they would plateau. And that's the reason I think that is when you're moving through space, again, sprinting is mass specific. Who produces the most force, again, the shortest amount of time, and it's mass specific. After a while, your body gets used to that mass, your body weight, and no longer becomes effective. If you train with the same weight on a barbell, you no longer can get better at it. It's going to get easier. And it has the same, it's 5 to 7 times ground reaction forces in the body. So I think you have to add sprint modalities. You have to rotate sprint modalities. I use uphill sprinting on grass. I use downhill sprinting. I use sleds. I use ankle weights. There's a company called Lila Movement Technology. They have weighted sleeves and stuff like that. That stuff is phenomenal. And I use combinations. I use ankle weights, weight vests, uphill, downhill. But we actually regular sprint probably 15-20% of the time because we use a lot of contrasting. But that's how you hack the code of the body. I think the body the body's scared to go faster. It's homeostasis. It's trying to stay normal. It hates change. So you have to force change by changing this modality. There's gravity, there's braking forces. You got to work the glutes, the hamstring, you get to work quads, hip flexors. And regular sprinting can't do all those things. So for instance, everybody starts out using loads or going uphill to work on acceleration technique and proper front side mechanics. And a lot of my kids, and I use that because when my kids run with a sled, they can run as fast as they can, but the sled is slowing them down so much they get less eccentric loading. But yet the brain can think. They can think what positions they need to be in. Mm-hmm. And that sled won't move unless they're on their forefoot. I get a lot of heel strikers. I mean, about 60-75% of the kids I get, because they're not track athletes, they run on their heels or flat or midfoot. So they can't run on that. They have to run forefoot on a sled. So that right there corrects their mechanics. They have to almost use frontside mechanics when they run with this load, and that almost ingrains form in them. And I can cue them as they run this sled because it's slowing their body down. They can think and make changes. Because sprinting is so high speed, it's an animal-like brain. You can't think. It's happening so fast. So after that, I kind of move into, once we contrasted just to flatland sprinting, then the cues carry over. And then I can think what I can do. Then we go uphill. And I time everything too. We have records for everything. We have a record for the sled. We have a record with a sled fly, a sled in the 10. We have a record uphill. We have a record uphill with ankle weights. We have uphill with a vest. We have a record downhill. We have a record flatland. We have a flatland at the fly 10, 520, 530. We have a flatland 10, first 20, first 30. We have meters. So we have a lot. Now here's the thing. They might not break all the records, and this is a West-side thing. If they can break one of those records once or twice a month, they're happy.
Yeah.
I have a kid that he might not get better in the first 20, but he'll get faster in the fly 510 and 520. He's happy. He may not break his record uphill, but he may break it downhill. Yeah. And when I come back to the flat sprint, he's better because I've changed it. The body is never can adapt, and never to adapt makes it adapt better, I believe. So that's how I do it. I kind of rotate those. And back in the day, I used to actually do downhill right at the end, right before a championship or a combine to overspeed. And I believe that the heck's the go-to tendon complex. The body is actually in fear of getting hurt. So you can do all the right things. You can do the right lifting. You can do the right plyometrics. You can do the right sled sprint. You can do the right speed work with maximum rest. The body might be scared to run faster. So it need to take away gravity so it can move faster. And a nervous system can feel those high speeds. I had a girl that went from 26 to 200 to a 25:08 in 12 weeks. We did downhill. She goes, it felt like my legs moved by themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. Falling downhill almost as a cue. I've heard of Darren use that.
Just yesterday, I have a cross country girl that does a triple jumper, and those two don't mix. Yeah,
it's weird. That's a weird. Super elastic. She's got to just be crazy elastic. That's the only way.
So I mean, she's a great broad jumper. So she had that going for her. So she came in broad jumping 6'11". Now she jumps 8'5". She did that yesterday, and she has bad mechanics from just running miles and 5, 6, 7 miles. She has poor frontside mechanics, and she wasn't as powerful. But so I threw out the wickets. I do wickets too. I forgot to do that. I put wickets in the thing too. That's another modality.
It's like timing over wickets.
Yep, I time wickets. I time 10, first 10, or time 20, 30 meter yard wickets. And I find that, well, let's go back to that girl. That girl, she can only stride about through 6'2" wickets. And I stretched it out to 6'10". It looked ugly. Mm-hmm. But it taught her how to bound and be elastic each step and the hit center of mass hard and spring through the things. And I put her on the downhill for I put her on the downhill for the last 4 weeks. Yesterday, and she was running a 10, she ran a 10, a 108, 106. And good goodness. It was raining yesterday. I couldn't go downhill, so I ran flatland. She ran 106 regular. She ran the same. She usually runs 123 a month ago. Those wickets, those downhills, she ran 106 twice.
It's a powerful combination. I want to talk about wickets real quick too before we get any further, because I know you've mentioned front side a couple times in this show, and then I know we've had this conversation about wickets where I think we can both agree that the higher wickets are not a good thing. Like you use just basically bars on the ground for that, right?
I started to do the top side. It's first of all, it was hard to find the spacing. I might call Altus. I called colleges. I called the top track coach, so I had to kind of experiment with him. But I found when he had the wickets with the hurdles up 6-inch wickets, it was my first thoughts too. Knee drive isn't always frontside mechanics is over bastardized because what creates frontside mechanics is the amount of force you apply on the ground. That'll cycle the leg back around. The more force you apply on the ground, the better your frontside mechanics are. So people looking at it the wrong way. And I think some of my fastest runner, you've probably seen her, I posted to you, Danny Smith. She's a championship Division II sprinter, and she got her down from a 110 fly to a 91 fly. And you watch her run, she don't have great frontside mechanics. And we put her through those 6-inch hurdles. It was a struggle. They just can't move smoothly. And her thing is she has tight hip flexors. So, but she's still powerful. So I'd say, let me flip these things upside down. And what it does, if athletes are in fear, they can't produce force. So they're in fear of kicking these hurdles. Once you flip the hurdles upside down, they can now focus on applying force hard and getting between the barriers. And that's what you want them to do. If they're worried about the height and bring their foot and dorsiflexing so much,
it kills it.
You're not going to get. It's going to take you longer to get results, and it may even slow them down. I think it slows them down a little bit. That's why I like doing the hurdles upside down now.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think Chris Korfist was the first person I heard say like using like low when he would have his videos. The wickets would be like 2, maybe 4 inches tall, and I've agreed more and more and more with that to the point where even now it would be like, look, 2 inches or just the bars on the ground because. Sorry, go ahead.
The thing that is crazy to me, it's amazing how good those hurdles are. I was like, oh, they're working on form, but nobody times them. I never seen anybody time them. So I started timing them and tested them. So I did like a scientist would. I did it before, in the middle, and after. I had one kid I've trained for years. He's a short kid. He's 5'5", and he goes, I run a 4.540. Like. And I clocked him, he ran a 4.8. He clocked him in a 4.9. And I clocked his 10 fly, and he was a 98. Then I said, and I could see why. He's a fast frequency strider. I mean, he has fast frequency, but he has a short stride. So let me just lengthen the stride. So I laid the hurdles out there, and I stretched them out with 6'10", and I stretched them out. It looked ugly, but after a while, I was timing him. So he ran a 98 normal. He ran a 111, but I got him down every week after week. He rolled it down. I got him down to a 101. He looked smooth. It looked like they weren't even there. Once I got him to 101, I pulled the hurdles out. He ran an 88.
Yeah, this is 10-yard fly because you talk 10 fly. Like that's an important distinction. Because a
lot of track coaches in the whole entire world uses meters. I like to use yards because I want my field athletes to compare to what they can do with my track athletes. I want my whole gym to compete with each other, but it comes cumbersome if I'm converting meters to yards. So I can easily do it, but I have a formula for it. But that's why I use yards primarily. So these times you're hearing these are yards.
Yeah.
These are yards.
Yeah.
So the 0.8, at 0.8, you can see he'd be a world-class runner almost.
Yeah, that would be pretty fast. He should be on some elite, 4x1 somewhere with that, or just about.
I'd say I got 11 or 12 kids. I have a list I post every week. I got 11 or 12 kids under a 9.0 10-yard fly, which would probably equate to a 1.0.
Yeah, that's still moving. That's still moving real fast.
I got 6 girls that run under 1.0. I got 2 at 91. I got 1 at 92 and 1 at 95, 194.
Yeah,
and that would equate to a 101, which is pretty. It's not blazing, but it's pretty quick.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's hard to get. Those kids are pretty quick, but that shows how those wickets work. And my kids love them now. They almost run better through them now.
Yes, if it's not too high. Because I know that the thing I've learned, this talking to Darian enough, is that the high ones, even this relates to the step over the knee cue, because I use that step over the knee and the high wickets religiously, basically from age 25 to early 30s. And I would always run these 10 flies, and I would, no matter how hard I tried those cues, I would just go slower, and I would like frustrate the heck out of myself. And Darian had said, and I agree, is every time you step over the knee, you're actually creating a braking force. Because I think it prevents the shin from falling adequately. And so it's like you're maybe getting some positive adaptations, because I know the studies that have been done, I think there was a Japanese study that said using wickets as preconditioning, and I don't know how high the wickets were, but helped the back foot to get off, to be picked up faster in readiness for the next stride, I think was their adaptation. And then that would help feed into the sprint in a positive way. But I find like as soon as it's too high, like that step over the knee, break, like high knee can actually become a break. And so that's where, to me, like those lowering the wickets, you get the plus of the back foot, being able to feed into recovery more appropriately, whatever context that is for the athlete. But then you lose the negative of that like high step over the knee break that you're going to get. Because I would always watch track sprinters warm up. And then a lot of times I would see this as the really heavily coached ones. When they would do their stride outs, they come out of the blocks around 40, start slowing down. When they'd slow down, sometimes they do that step over the knee action because it probably just felt good. They've done it in their practice. This is what feels good to slow down, is the step over the knee as I go. I just thought it was funny because you wouldn't think about it outright. But anyways.
When I look at my film of my time wickets, you can see that recovery look faster.
Yeah.
And that's why the times actually get quicker. I could notice that part of it.
Yeah,
it's almost like a boost.
Yeah, it gives you like an intention to get the foot to the next. There's that, like there's a solid intentionality that is created there.
That's how you said it perfectly. There's more intent to get it there faster.
Yeah.
You run, you're not making this segments.
Yeah. So going back to the beginning too, because I wanted to talk about kind of like front to back, and because I love, there's some parts of your system that I think are so cool. And the main one I just love is the go outside the groove of just normal sprinting and getting outside that thing, coming back to it. But even starting with the sleds and the acceleration, I think about just like a sled and the force it has on your hips, keeping the hips back a little bit. I love that because I think it even feeds into upright sprinting like to a degree. Yeah, it's kind of like as you flip that person in acceleration and flip their torso up to upright, there's a lot of that similar hip angle things going on. And so I really like that as a good starting point. I mean, sleds are simple, but I think they're awesome. Jay Makins probably wouldn't do them if they weren't great. I don't understand
why most college coaches don't use them a lot. They are the best. They are so good. Yeah. Sleds are amazing. Yeah. It's so simple though. It's like, it's just a metal piece of metal and some weights. But it's so good. It does so many things well for sprinting. It's amazing. Yeah. I just think, I don't know why they don't use it.
Yeah, and it's
I had a college coach actually asked me what I did. I had a girl. One of my best long jumpers. I don't do 300 meters. I don't do too much long volume on my jumpers because they only run 100 feet. And I just did flies and I did a lot of sled with her. I did not that much, but a little bit. And she came back and beat her 300 meter time by 3 seconds. And he goes, "How did he do it?" I said, "I had sleds." And he goes, "I'm going to start implementing." But this guy, we've been coaching for years, they do it, but it's just, I don't know. They need to do it a lot to get the adaptation.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so self-organizing too, because it just gives the athlete something to work against. And I think it's more powerful than even a cue or an instruction you can give an athlete, because it helps them to feel something to work against.
My sprinter that went from a 26.02 to 25.08. This is interesting. Now, her problem, she couldn't get out of the blocks. And I have another sprinter like that right now. They can't accelerate good. Their acceleration is poor. And then the reason this is why, their first couple of steps, they're applying. I think you need to, when you come out, you start in any sport, you got to apply, it's definitely vertical forces, but in the beginning, there's more horizontal forces. There's a combination of both, but once you get to upright, it's more vertical forces. So what I did is I put a band around their waist, and I can't feel them pulling me. Those two girls, I can't feel them. They can't pull me hard enough. And that's why they can't accelerate. Now, that tells me they're running out the blocks with too much vertical force, not horizontal forces. And I have my fastest accelerator. I have a girl that can get out of the blocks crazy. They're just pulling me like it's like a pull horse. Mm-hmm. That shows they're applying force in the right direction. They can get out of the blocks. But I can actually feel where they're applying the force. That's why I do a band sometimes too.
Yeah, like JB Morin would say, the direction, the DRF, or what direction are you applying the forces as you come out of the blocks or the start, and then how long can you keep them there appropriately before everything just shoots up to vertical, yes. I guess you could say. Yeah. So sleds, yes. Man. It's
and that's why I do different jumping. I have a conjugate jump system, because those different jumps affects different parts of sprinting. And obviously jumping, obviously.
Yeah.
But the horizontal jumps affect the start, I believe. And med ball throws, chest med ball throws. And, obviously the vertical is going to affect everything, like straight up box jumping. And we do the jump. Now we do the just jump mat. And you need reactive stuff like bounding and hurdle hops. Those are all valuable things.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is, I think people they long-term block those things. So if I just do broad jumps and chest med ball throws for a month, and then I go to just vertical stuff, and then I go to reactive depth jumps and hurdle hops, I lose the qualities I lost in the beginning of just doing the horizontal stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a rotation in my jumps as well, because so I'm building all those qualities at the same time. And it's just variations. It's called conjugate. Like, there's ways to do a broad jump. We do a standing broad jump. We do a weighted broad jump. We do a seated box broad jump. We do a depth jump broad jump, a hurdle hop depth jump broad jump. So it's different, but it's always the same concept, but it's different. And that's how they don't plateau in those. But at least I'm building, and I got we hurdle hop all the time, taking ground contact time. That way we're working on that ground contact time. And in our hurdle hops, I let my guys get over that hurdle, get off the ground in 0.15 seconds. And I just had, and then my broad jumpers, my girls need to be at least 7.6, 8. My boys need to be at least 9, 9.6. So if I don't have those qualities, it's going to be hard to get them faster or make their agility better. But I have to build those all at the same time. My jump mat, they need to be, every time we come in, there's a just jump mat. Everybody just jumps on it. We do seated jumps on it. We do knee jumps on it. We do dip jumps on it. We jump over hurdles, 2 hurdles on it. We jump over 6. We have a 12-inch, 18, 24 onto it. Jump over 18-inch hurdle, 24-inch hurdle. We just did with dumbbells. They're just always changing, and that's how you prove those explosive power quality. So my jumping is conjugate.
Yeah.
Again, if you do the same thing for too long, you no longer get bad at it. You don't want to get better at it. You just stand there and jump.
Yeah.
You're missing a lot of the key qualities that you need to build for explosive power, for sprinting, jumping. My high jumpers, I do run up and touch the vertex, and that's basketball high jump, because that's their sport, running up and jumping off one leg. I have my best long jumper. He jumped 24 feet. You put him on a jump mat. He's a 1 foot jumper. Off 2 feet on the jump mat, he jumps 30. You jump on a box, he's jumping 54, which is okay. Standing on a vertical on the vertex, he's only jumping 30. You run and jump that kid, he's jumping. That guy can touch 11.6 on a vertex. Mm-hmm. He's only 5'10", and it's off 1 foot. And he ran off one leg and jumped over a 72-inch hurdle.
You're listening to the Just Fly Performance Podcast, brought to you by Simply Faster. Yeah, that's pretty good. That Cliff Rivelto at Kansas State had an equation for his high jumpers where it was like, the bigger the difference between their standing vertical and their 3-step off one leg, the better their high jump would be. And I think that even if their standing vert actually went down, that could be a quote unquote good thing in light of that high jump because of just pure reactivity. Yeah. So I do want to get into the thing that really fascinates me about what you do. I mean, the thing that I'm just like super interested in, I'm interested in all of it, obviously, but like the thing that I like, my mind's like, I want to know more about this is, okay, you talked about the sprinting, and I've had like Grant Fowler on the show where he does like a lot of rotations with barbell lifts. And I just love how you do that with the sprints. Because when I was a jumps coach, I would agree with you. Like if I'm going to coach triple jumpers, we're going to do everything but the competition triple jump pretty much in training. We're going to do all sorts of different variants of it. And then when you compete, you'll be better. Because I think about, yes, neural highways, things that start to get to such a tight neural highway, there's no more room to grow. They say like the idea of, well, if you keep doing the same thing you've always done, you're just going to get the same results. You need to do something else. And
okay. Law of accommodation, it prevails.
Yeah. And so, but sprinting is like the ultimate in that, because like all these other things, like high jump or jumping off one leg or throwing something, like throwing a javelin or a baseball, like those are skills we probably all picked up at some point, a little bit later in life, relatively speaking, maybe age 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, whatever. Granted, we're doing that from our youth, but you can't argue, like you start walking at age 1, you start learning to run at age 2, like, or, give or take a little bit, you start, and you've been running your whole life. Like this is the singular skill that no matter who you are, you've been doing this, and it's been hardwiring in your system. And I think that's why we talk about the speed as being the single thing that's the hardest to improve of anything. Like you got vertical jump, whatever. Yeah, vertical jump's easier. It is the hardest because I think it's the most hardwired. And so
here's the thing about speed: when you're jumping, you're lifting as one event. you're sprinting, you're worried about now 100 meters for girls it's like 50, 60 steps. Boys is 40. You got to worry about, and the long jumper, they're taking 16, 20 steps. You got to, all those steps must be accounted for in sprinting. If there's not a lot of force, you're not going to stride along, you got problems. You have to account for every step. The force protection must be good. The technique must be good. That's why sprinting is the hardest modality to improve.
Yeah, but that's why I love having these conversations and how to improve it, because I think it's kind of a master key almost that can filter to everything, especially once those skills become so good. And I think, by the time a kid gets to you, maybe they're 16, right? Like they're already, in regards to the grand scheme of skill ability, in relation to what their body can output, they're probably somewhat high compared to like a jump. Maybe they're like a 3 out of 10 jumping because they just haven't done it very much, but you've been sprinting your whole life. And so you have to create these things. So you start with the sleds, then going into uphill. When do you start bringing in these, okay, we're going to go downhill. Today we're going to do an uphill time. Today we're going to do this time. How often a week are you sprinting? And then what factors feed into how you're rotating those elements?
Okay. Well, so usually the first month we kind of, as you said, we kind of do that with the hill and the sled. And now there's two types of sprinters. There's stride length guys and there's stride frequency guys. So my stride length guys, they usually are slow frequency guys. I need to actually kind of almost fix. I need to create more foot speed, as my kids call them. So at that point, I will, we'll start to go uphill, and actually we'll start to go uphill and take the weights off, go uphill, and then we'll do more downhill with those kids, because those guys already have this. They have the ability to. They're called gliders. I call them gliders. So at that point, I actually have them go more in the direction of downhill. I used to wait to the end, but now I kind of feed it in every 2 weeks. And if it's really severe, like that girl I was telling you about, I'm all in for 3 or 4 weeks at a time. Now, if they are short striders, I believe the resistance in the hill, because that posterior train is going to give them more power, more propulsion. So I keep those people on. They'll do downhills too, because everybody needs foot speed. Let's be honest. Yeah. It's a combination of both. You got to build both at the same time. But they'll be more on the hill and the sled and more ankle weight stuff. And I'll put those people in the wickets, because those people, they need this stride longer. So I need to gradually space them out to bring them to a long, I have a girl, Maddie Kelly, and I've trained her for about 1.5 years. And her turnover is incredible. But, she probably strides about 5-6 foot when I first got her. And I said, man, let me just get her stride longer, So I just, basically the sled and wickets was her key. So she started out running she ran a 129 fly 10. And I got her wickets to 6.6, then 6.10, then 7.2. And she usually, now take a look at wickets away, she doesn't stride that long, but she can usually, in 10 yards, she can take 4.5 on a good day steps. And then in meters, she's probably taking 5 steps. And that's how she got the 91. But before, she was taking 7-8 steps. So that's how I kind of approach to. And then again, she's getting a little bit of downhill, but not as much as the short striders.
Interesting.
But the long striders, they are just long and gapy. They need the downhill. Like the kid I told you about that went from a 139, he had a long stride. He was great to the wickets. He needed the downhills and the sled, and that took his turnover to a level, and voila, he went from running 14 miles an hour to 19 miles an hour, or about 20 now. So that's how I kind of diagnosed both. Yeah. And once they become pretty high level, it's almost like I'm doing it. They get a little taste of something maybe once every 2 weeks rotation. Yeah. Once they almost are good at they stride long and fast. They're balanced. I can kind of just do maybe once a week or once every 2 weeks. I rotate those.
I like that, man. I like. I hadn't heard too many people talk about using sleds and hill to improve stride length before, but it makes perfect sense to me, and also in the sense that I think of it in terms of hip level. Like when you're on the sled or running uphill, your hips actually have to be a little bit lower to the ground.
Yeah.
And one of the recent Darian Barr webinars we put together was talking about, Darian was talking about how the people who have longer strides, that actually comes from hips being a little bit, it's counterintuitive because we used to think, oh, long strides, super tall, super bouncy. That doesn't work. Yeah, triple jump, but not sprinting. And one of the prime people to look at was Allison Felix, like whose stride length is very long as per her height. And she runs with lower hips and slightly more bent leg on the contact. But that low hip allows a huge shin drop translation. And I think about, and because I feel this myself, like and I've seen it too in the same, like I remember a very distinctive, a long jumper I was training when I was coach. I was like 26 and I had no idea at the time, but we were doing a lot of hills in the fall and he was getting way faster. And I was like, oh, this is all endurance stuff. Why is he getting faster? Like, in my mind, GPP endurance. But he was the king of the boundy stride, And so that hill was giving him what he didn't have. And I always feel that for myself too. And I'm doing a lot of hill work. My stride feels so powerful. And maybe, like the push, the low hip, all that stuff together. I really like that contrast where, versus, and I agree with you. Zeus says, well, everyone needs a downhill from no matter who you are, just because it's so intense, right?
Let me tell you, nobody's running at a 0.80, 10 meters per, 10-yard fly, like you're saying, or even a 0.9 hardly. So they all need turnover.
Yeah.
So that's how I kind of address that,
Do you do it?
Everybody just actually average speed. So they all need that turnover. That's why they need a little. That's medicine. You need a little medicine.
Yeah, it is. It's a medicine. Yes, it is. It's like if you want to be fast, that you need that medicine every now and then. And I would like to talk about the dosage just every 2 weeks. But I want to ask you, like, I know you do downhill. Maybe that's because is it convenience? That's just like a downhill area next to your gym. But do you have any towed overspeed, or is that like a thing too? Or what's your take there?
I used to I don't like towing because now you need to have an athlete that's somewhat faster, a little faster there, or similar speed, and they both have to be at the same. They have to be both relatively fresh. So if one pulls one too fast, they're going to be on their face. I saw a girl, tear ACL. She got pulled so fast she fell. That kind of spooked me. So I just stuck to downhills. So towing is great, but I just I think downhills it's more controlled, and a lot of coaches say it distorts form, but that can easily be fixed. I can fix that pretty quickly,
Yeah.
Just get them back to get mechanics. But towing is when I get it. If I get it 1080, then I might start towing people.
There you go, nice and controlled. We'll hit up 1080 here with this podcast, and we'll get some case studies for you. So. That I love that though, and I love too that medicine. That's a quote that's going to stick with me, man. It takes me back to a study that I read.
I think in training modalities, if you're lifting, like this Prelipin's chart, that tells you how much lift you should do and what percentage. And Charlie and James Smith and a lot of sprints coaches, there's only so much volume you can handle. That's all medicine. You need to take it, but if you take too much, it'll poison you. Medicine's good. If you take too much medicine, it'll poison you. You don't take enough medicine, you won't get better.
Yep. Even too much water can be a problem at some point,
Exactly.
The
good stuff.
Yeah, because I was going back to a study about, it was like there was a group, it was a training group. I don't even know what the population. I don't think it was untrained people. I think there was somewhat trained individuals, but they had the group that did just flat sprinting, just uphill, just down. No, it was a group that did just uphill, just downhill, and then a group that did both uphill and downhill in the same block. And the group that did the uphill and downhill got substantially faster than the group that just did one or the other. And so
there you go.
I think about your system, and I think there are so many overspeed haters like that. That had turned me off to overspeed for a while because people find a way to hate. Like you said, it makes you overstride. It does this to your, point of contact. It does that. I mean, the body's smart. It's going to figure it out. As long as you're not doing it every single day, and as long as you're getting back to something else that contrasts it, right? That pulls back to the other center point. Like clearly, the results speak for themselves.
The body adapts. It's an amazing adapter. It's always trying to survive. Survival, and you put demands upon it. It adapts to survive. Once you get off those downhills, it'll adapt back to normal.
Yes,
and people don't realize that. They don't realize that. And I've never had no issues with muscle strains or pulls. Because usually they shut down the body. And I don't do a ton of those too. The volume is always very low.
Yeah.
If you do a hot touch volume again, you poison yourself.
Yep. How many do you do in a session? If you're going to do like, you're doing 20s downhill or something, or 10s downhill?
Maybe 3 to 4 tops. Mm-hmm. Now, like Danny Smith, she's a freak. She did 8.
Jeez.
But
high
she was
dosage.
sore for a week, though.
I believe it.
Yeah. So, yeah, she learned a lesson, and they self-corrected. Like, okay, you're right. I can only do a couple of these.
Do you ever do do you ever do the calf weights with downhill? That'd be gnarly.
Yes, I have. Oh yeah.
I was thinking 100%. Of recovery times for a week. That'd be a pretty serious one.
I have. I'm crazy, man. They call me the mad scientist. I experiment with everything because you don't know if it works, mm-hmm. or you know what limits you can push unless you try things.
Yeah.
And if I was in a public sector, I wouldn't be able to do these experiments and have these numbers. Mm-hmm. There'd always be some conflict, you know. So, but I always tried crazy things. Because some of the crazy things, they come out to be great things.
Yeah. So off season. Sorry if I keep. I know our time is short, and I'm like, I want to keep going on this. So generally speaking, I know it's always different for everyone, right? But like generally speaking, you wouldn't do downhill more than every other week. So like every other week, maybe every 3 weeks or something like that. Or
unless it's a severe case, like I got that cross country runner. You know. Her fibers are super slow. Mm-hmm. Her intermediate are all slow. So I got to revert those over. So, you know, normally I wouldn't do it all the time like that. But that was a special case.
Got it.
You know, and maybe if I do, just here and there. This is here and there, you know. Some coaches, I know some people that did 6 weeks in a row. Which is, I've done that before. Right before I had a kid, football player, he's at Pitt. I did him 5 weeks in a row, and he was a phenomenal. He was phenomenal. He was coming off an ACL, and he needed to get his speed back for college. He was a Division I football player, and I just kept on grass. It worked out great. He ran a 4.5. He was like a 4.9. He had coming off ACL surgery, got on a 4.5 pretty quickly.
Do you do like how many? I know conjugate, right? Louie Simmons is like a force day, a dynamic day, right? Or max effort dynamic. What does your sprint look like on the week? Like a weekly setup typically?
I follow Charlie Francis vertical integration. So my high days, you know, my high day are my leg days. So my max effort day is a sprint day, and then my dynamic effort day is a sprint day. The other days my philosophy is this: there's 7 days a week. I want to get most I can on those high intensity, high neurological days, so we have 5 days to rest.
Yeah.
So and the sled actually is good because it limits the soreness.
Yes.
Because that allows me to lift and create more force production in the gym. If I was regular sprinting, I had to be more careful because now you're competing against the same resources. Yeah. So that's why we do very little regular sprinting. But if I can raise their squat and their deadlift up, they're going to come back the next week sprinting crazy. And that's how I can knock their time down pretty quickly. I mean, I had a girl go from 120 in a 10-yard fly to Shannon Taub. She's a jumper. She went from in 8 weeks. She went from 120 to 1 flat. Her squat went from 145 to 300 pounds. And she went to college. They never seen nobody get that strong and that fast in that short amount of time. But you got to know when you have to be smart with the programming. That max effort is key. It stimulates the nerve. When you're maxing out, your nervous system, you're slow, you're fast, your intermediate fibers are all firing quickly. That's what you want to have happen in the sprint. And you're fixing your weaknesses in. You go back to the sprints. Now you're working the opposite end. All those fibers are working as fast as too at higher speeds. And against no time limit, you're going to get fast at that point.
So I was trying to figure out this because if I'm doing downhill, if I'm sprinting twice a week, and I'm doing downhill about every other for the most part, unless I'm a special case. What do you do? And you don't flat sprint that often. I mean, is a typical week would be 2 sled days or an uphill day and a sled day, and then the next week you do flat, like how would that go?
Yep. So say the first week of the month. Yeah, we'll max out. Let's say we max out a deadlift, and then we will sled sprint that day, and then we'll clock one sprint. We'll clock some sled sprints. And then we'll clock one regular sprint. Then we'll come back dynamic for day, do the sled again. Clock some sled sprints, clock one free sprint. Come back the next week's max out squat. Then we'll come out and then we'll do, okay. Then we'll maybe go on the hill.
Got it.
And then we'll come back the same day, dynamic effort day, come on the hill again. And then we're doing pure hill that time, clocking flies, maybe 20-yard flies that time. Then the third week, maybe we're doing some other sort of deadlift, maybe a rack pull. A rack pull is very good. One of my good sprinters, we just did rack pulls, and because our glute was weak, that made it faster. And then we did downhill that week. Mm-hmm. Then we come back the next week, and then we come back and hit the sled again. And then maybe then the next week we're maxing out deadlift again. Now we're doing ankle weights, and sometimes I actually contrast. Right, we may do a sled, hill. I may do the modalities, do two different sled and hill in the same day, and clock it.
Okay, got it.
So I'm doing sled and hill in the same day, and I may do ankle weights and uphill in the same day. And I may contrast to a regular uphill sprint in the same day.
Oh, got it. Those two are contrasting each other if they're in the same day.
So as the reps go on, we actually go down to we strip away the resistance.
Got it. So you start with the sled, and then every set you're just taking a plate off the sled or something like that. And
Yep.
And then are you doing serially like sled and hill or?
Now here's another thing too that I was scared to do, because if you run with the sled and you contrast off it, you're overspeed right there. So I actually do that and go downhill sometimes. We'll do the sled and we'll contrast and run it downhill right after that, and you get even more overspeed in the same day. So we'll do sled, rest about 5 minutes, go downhill.
Wow.
Come in, rest, do some other things. Exercises, come out, sled, go down again right there, and it's a great carryover. But I was worried about that. They might pull muscle. They're going so fast, but it had never seen no effects like that.
Robust. The body is robust. The body is robust.
It's robust. But I've seen a great. That's how I did with that girl that went from a 139 to 106, and it wasn't. She was stuck at 120, 115. I did the sled. I went downhill, and she was flying.
Man, that's awesome. I love it.
And that runway speed is going to help her triple jump 100%.
So it's kind of like if I say what's the meat and potatoes, like I like Rafe Kelly, who's been on the show, has said like the whole food is movement and then training is a supplement. Kind of your whole food, if you will, for speed is kind of the hills and sleds. That's like the bigger portion, and then the downhill and then the flat is like a little bit like less as needed by case. If I had to generalize things, I like to generalize things.
Those are the homework. The hills, the downhill. That's the homework. The test is the flat line.
Got it.
It's like you go to class and you got calculus homework and you got this, derivatives, all that stuff. The actual test is the flat line, and you don't need to test that much in college, in school. You only take tests every so often.
Don't remind me of calculus class, please. Bad memories.
You do your homework and you do well in the test. If you just do the test all the time, the flatland running, it's going to be hard to get better. You can get better, obviously, but it's harder.
I hear you. How often are you testing flat? Like, okay, 10-yard fly, like once a month then about? Like to that big, like, all right, let's go for this PR on flat? Like, how often is that typically happening?
Probably 3 days, 3 times a month.
3 times a month, okay.
Three or 4 times a month, yeah, absolutely.
Would you say for an advanced athlete it might happen less often versus a beginner, or just kind of?
Yeah, because the higher you get, well, I think that no, the higher you get, you gotta be careful. They're applying so much force. It's tough. They get more fatigued. So yeah, I'd say less, a little bit less, maybe once twice a month. And the level of improvement is little.
Yeah.
At a certain point, once you get to a 0.90 or 0.88 meter fly, to take it to 0.87 or 0.86 is tough. Mm-hmm. And it might be demoralizing to get tested all the time. Okay, I was 8.7 now, and I'm running 91. What the hell is going on? Mm-hmm. It's mentally, psychologically damaging to him.
Big time. And that's one thing I will actually, maybe we can kind of close out talking about this, because another thing I really like about your system is continual PRs. And it's funny because your weight system and transfer is kind of very much like Grant Fowler's, switching weekly, and just like you're always able to come in and mentally be like, I think I can PR in this today, right? Like, so tell me about the power of PRs and how that works in your system and the whole system.
Absolutely. So I just started out, I remember at the beginning it was just lifting. Okay, I got a squat, I got a deadlift, I got a bench. But then I said, and now I love jumping so much. So then I just, I added these. I have a list of probably 500 different jump variations.
PR, you can find PR 500 ways.
I've had kids that did jumps, and I had a girl, a long jumper. She's been with me for 4 years. She did a new jump she'd never done before. She goes, I see people do this. I've never done this. But if they get that PR there, it might not be a regular jump, but they're happy about it. And it puts them in a psychologically winning mentality. And if they get that, I have a kid that he might not, his downhill, his regular sprint might not go up right away. We tested a lot, but it might be staying the same. But his sled sprint went up. It went down, I'm sorry. He got a PR on that. He's happy. It's not psychological damage. And he won a victory. And then we do a jump map. I got a girl that she was stuck at 22, just standing and jumping. So we had her jump over a hurdle, 18-inch hurdle to the mat. She went up in that. It wasn't her record, but then she got a PR. She's happy. And then it just puts in the mindset. And then eventually they get that. I believe it creates a dopamine. Mm-hmm. And that dopamine, it's like when that adrenaline gets up, it just carries over to, they just start breaking records. That's why I tell my kids, I go, what do we do? And they finish the sentence, we break records in here. And that's what we do. We want to break a record, just a small record, 0.01 in the jump, 0.01 in the sprint, 2.5. If we can just do that, they're happy. That's all athletes want to do is be happy. That's why when I first got my gym, I got the equipment. I got strength equipment and jump equipment, just a Vertec. I couldn't test, but after that, I got the stuff to test because athletes like to see numbers. If they can see numbers, they know where they're at. They know how fast they are. They know how strong they are with the tendo, and they know how high they jump for the jump mat. And at all times, so if they can just get one PR, it is psychologically the best thing. It just carries over. And then when they go to their sport practice, they're in a happy attitude. They're going to dominate. It's such a big deal, and we have competitions too. It creates competition. It's iron sharpens iron. They compete with themselves, and they compete with others, and then when they compete with others, that's even the best thing. Have competition. I have a competition Thursday. We sprint and jump. Man, that when they have those days, they always get a PR on that day. So huge to have your athletes to have a lot of records and a lot of measurables for your athletes to chase, and that's the best way because at least they can get one of them, and that's the best thing to do as a trainer or coach.
I agree. I love it. I think no matter who you coach, powerlifters, sprinters, cross country swimmers, like to have all these ways you can PR. I think there's so much power in that. So I'm glad you were able to share that with us.
I got a record sheet that's 3 pages long. It even goes down to triceps. They may just get something as simple like a tricep 10 rep record. It may be
walk out with something. I walked out with something today. Yeah.
It may be an inverse curl record. Like I used to do 40 pounds of my inverse curl. Now I'm done to 35. They're happy. And then eventually that's going to help them run faster.
Yes.
Eventually another record's going to carry over.
Yep. Dopamine.
I got simple things like an ab record.
Yeah, it's meaningful. Yeah.
it means something, dude. And if they beat all these records, they'll be a phenomenal athlete after it's all said and done. It's all said and done. They've mastered all the modalities, all the machines in my gym, all the testing equipment in my gym. They'll be phenomenal. It takes a process to ratchet up their records and beat these PRs all the time.
Yeah, for sure.
That's people go, how often do you test? We test every session, every rep. Every lift, every jump, every sprint, we're testing.
Awesome.
And if they aren't doing good, I go, hey, you got a game yesterday. There's nothing you can do. And usually my kids, my kids improve so much. If they played a basketball game the day before, they'll tie the record. And that they never go down. They usually tie it or maybe a little below. But that shows. I go, what did you do yesterday? We played basketball. Okay. But then they know they want to come in fresh, so they can actually improve a little bit. Super conversation.
Yeah. Good stuff, Brandon. Well, hey, I think that's a good thing to close on. I think that's a really important concept, and it was really cool hearing about your sprint, your training philosophy, and all these things. And I'm going to go run me some downhills this week. I'll let you know how I did. So I appreciate that, man. Hey, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Oh, thank you. This is awesome.
Thanks for tuning in to another show. Man, just an awesome nuts and bolts talk on speed. Love those chats. Always taking something away from them. So glad to have Brandon on. And yeah, thanks for being here, tuning in. If you want to help us out, you can leave us a rating or review on iTunes, Stitcher, whatever you're listening to. We appreciate your reviews, your feedback, or if there's another guest that you want to hear on the show, or someone you want to hear more of, you can definitely let me know. Check us out on social media. Send me a message on Instagram. My email's on the website, justflysports.com. And before we leave, we wanted to give one last shout out to our sponsor, simplyfaster.com, suppliers of high-end training technology. They've been a longtime sponsor of this show, and we are thankful and grateful for their support. So check out what they have going on at simplyfaster.com. All right, we'll catch you guys next week. Have a good one.